Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Bhagavan Sarvabhuteshu Lakshitah Svatmana Harihi Drishyair Buddhya Dibhir Drashta Lakshanair Anumapakaihi. Translation. The personality of Godhead, Lord Shri Krishna, is in every living being, along with the individual soul. And this fact is perceived and hypothesized in our acts of seeing and taking help from the intelligence. Now you all have to listen very carefully to this, because it's not so easy to grasp. It's a logical proposition. Shastra means that which is stated as a fact. So in Shastra, for instance, we get statements wherein Krishna says, Matah parataram nanyat kinchidasti. There is nothing superior to me. It's simply a statement. And those who have faith in Shastra accept it. But this statement is unusual inasmuch as we're not being asked herein to simply accept, but we're being asked to use our intelligence to understand why Krishna, or Krishna, well, it doesn't mention Krishna here. We're talking about Bhagavan, who is called Hari. How we can, using our own intelligence and senses, ascertain the existence of Bhagavan. So it's a logical construct, syllogism. So please listen very carefully and try to understand. I'll read the translation again. The personality of Godhead, Lord Shri Krishna, is in every living being along with the individual soul. So that's a statement. Now how can we understand this? Hypothetically. Well, we can understand it, we can just accept it. Vyasadeva said. Shukadev Goswami said. But here we're being asked to make a logical understanding. Of course, in the verse itself it isn't elaborated on, but in the purport it is. So what is the hypothesis? Anumapaka. We all know that word, anuman. Anumanam means a guess. So this is a similar word. Anumapaka, hypothesis. This fact, the fact that Sri Krishna is in every living being along with the individual soul, this fact is perceived and hypothesized in our acts of seeing and taking help from the intelligence. Seeing here is used, as it's often used, to mean not just seeing but all the sensory acts. So seeing here stands for seeing, touching, smelling, feeling and tasting. Purport. The general argument of the common man is that since the Lord is not visible to our eyes, how can one either surrender unto Him or render transcendental loving service unto Him? It's a common challenge which the atheist thinks is simple proof that every theist is a nutcase. They say, well, we didn't see God, so how can you believe in God? It's just stupid. They say it's stupid to believe in God. We never saw God. This question proves that atheists are nutcases. Because the existence of anything is the existence especially of subtle phenomena are generally not perceived directly by the senses. Just like, for instance, when we are using our cell phone, we don't see the microwaves or whatever other things are coming and gradually giving us cancer. We don't see it. Its existence can be hypothesized. We don't directly perceive it. So it's a silly argument. And even if someone wanted to say prove it, well, not everything is prove that there's God. Well, what would you accept as proof? That should also be considered. You say, well, if God showed himself to me, I'd believe it. But we find in Mahabharata that Krishna showed his expanded form to Duryodhana, and he still didn't accept. He said it's just some magic trick. There's so many magicians in India, and Krishna's just another magician, that's all. So still he didn't accept. Natyena Krishne paratah svato va mito vidhadyeta grihabhratana madanta gobhya vishatanta misram punah punascharvita charvananam. Persons who have taken a vow not to recognize Krishna never recognize him, because they took a vow not to. Because they took a vow to not control their senses and to go to hell, and to thus chew what has already been chewed, they can't understand Krishna. This suggests that Krishna can be understood by those who have taken a vow, not grihavrata, not simply to be stuck in a dark, blind well, grihamanda kupam, but those who are Krishna vrata, those who have taken a vow to understand Krishna. They can perceive Krishna by controlling their senses. Those who don't control their senses go to hell. Not just controlling the senses like the Mayavadis, but purifying the senses. Atashri Krishna namadi navavedrahyam indriyai sivon mukhe hi jivadu swayameva sthurapiyadaha. By purified senses, we can perceive the presence of Krishna. For those who don't have purified senses, it's superfluous to say, show me God. They don't have the qualification to see Him. There's a question of qualification also. Can anyone prove the existence of atom? Can anyone prove it? Anyone here? Well, among physicists, they could probably prove it at some level. At the pre-quantum level, they could probably offer some proof. But then you have to be qualified to understand it. Otherwise, they may show some experiment. They might make a 27-kilometer long tunnel spending a few billion euros, which they, a few billion euros, who cares about a few billion euros? And try to make a big bang, and it might prove something to themselves, apart from the fact that they got away with a few billion euros. But for the layman, what they're doing, they don't understand at all. All they understand is that my tax bill went up a bit. That's all. I can scientifically deduce that I got less money than I wanted. They took more away from me. So the physicists, they can talk among themselves and they'll use lots of complicated mathematical terminology, and at the end they'll say, we proved it. Or they might say, we didn't prove it yet, give us a few more $billion, euros, who cares for dollars these days? Better have euros. And then we'll prove it. So it's a common challenge. Show me God. Well, in this verse, how we can see God, or how we can perceive by a hypothetical method the existence of God is being offered. So, to continue the purport, to such a common man who says, can we see God? And it may not just be atheists who see this. It may just be some ordinary people. They say, well, they hear people say this and they doubt. They think, oh, we can't see God, so maybe there is no God. So they're not sure. To such a common man, here is a practical suggestion given by Srila Shukadev Goswami as to how one can perceive the Supreme Lord by reason and perception. This is what scientific people like to hear about. Reason and perception. In other words, we're talking about rationalism and empiricism. Can we perceive God by rationalism and empiricism? The answer here is yes. Actually, the Lord is not perceivable by our present materialized senses, but when one is convinced of the presence of the Lord by a practical service attitude, there is a revelation by the Lord's mercy. That verse I was just quoting, Atashi Krishna Namadi. And such a pure devotee of the Lord can perceive the Lord's presence always and everywhere. A pure devotee perceives the Lord's presence always and everywhere, and the atheist cannot perceive the Lord anywhere, even if he comes directly in front of him. Like that example of Duryodhana. Another obvious example is that of Hiranyakashipu. That even when Vishnu came before him, before Hiranyakashipu, he didn't recognize that here's the Supreme. Hiranyakashipu still thought that I am the Supreme. So, he, a pure devotee, can perceive that intelligence is the form direction of the Paramatma, plenary portion of the personality of Godhead. Intelligence is the form direction of the Paramatma. Let's read on to understand what that means. The presence of Paramatma in everyone's company is not very difficult to realize even for the common man. That's quite a statement, isn't it? Even a common man. Here we're not talking about Muninama Manam. We're not talking about purified spiritualists, but we're talking about even common people. Here, Srila Prabhupada, following the commentaries of the previous Acharya, says that the presence of Paramatma in everyone's company is not very difficult to realize, even for a common man, even for a non-transcendentalist. The procedure is as follows. Okay, now we have to really apply our intelligence. That's what this verse is all about. How by applying our intelligence we can perceive the presence of the Supreme Lord. So now we're being taken on the journey to apply our intelligence to perceive the presence of the Supreme Lord. One can perceive one's self-identification and feel positively that he exists. Alright, everyone feels like they exist. No one feels that they're just a figment of someone else's dream. I don't really exist, I'm just someone else's dream. Well, we are. We're parts of Mahavishnu's dream, actually. But when Mahavishnu dreams, it's real also. That's the difference between our dream and his dream. So we exist. I think, therefore I am. That is the first axiom. It's something you can argue about it. If you're a Buddhist, you can argue about it. That nothing exists. The Buddhists, they say that nothing really exists. And they have many different philosophies to explain, and they argue with each other on how there is nothing. Some Buddhists say there's nothing this way, and others say no, there's nothing that way. But it doesn't seem to make any sense, because it's just like multiply anything by 0 and you get 0. So what's the point of wondering what you're multiplying if it's all simply 0? So anyway, I exist. You exist. I could postulate that, well, actually only I exist. But I didn't feel any pain in my knee or any sensation, so maybe you are all products of my imagination. Some people, there's a philosophy, what's that called? I can't remember. Something beginning with S. Can't remember. Doesn't matter anyway, because it's useless philosophy. So I presume that you also exist. And that we all have a common relationship. When I speak, I presume that the sound that I hear, you also hear, and the meaning that I intend to convey is not just heard by you, but it's processed. And the meaning that, of course, one has to speak in an intelligible way, but the meaning that I intend to convey is understood by you. If I say cow, now all in your minds you've got a mental picture of a cow, isn't it? There's no cow here. Of course you could make an argument that there is a cow, but it's not really worth making an argument, because we don't perceive any cow here. But you can think of a cow. There are different varieties of cows. In your mind's eye came some picture of a cow. So, cowness, the cowness of the cow appeared in your mind's eye. So when I said cow, I thought of a particular animal or entity that has the name cow, and you also thought of the same thing. When I say red, I think of a particular color, and you also think of the same color. And in this way, language is formed, and there's communication. So, I can also presume that you exist. I exist, and you exist. So, I exist. One can perceive one's self-identification and feel positively that he exists. He may not feel it very abruptly, but by using a little intelligence, he can feel that he is not the body. This is Srila Prabhupada's often used example, which is, it's actually a much higher philosophy than most people even think about, but it's easily demonstrable even to children. The example that Srila Prabhupada often gave, he would say, point to your head. So, okay, you like to point to your head? Point to your chest. You can do that. Point to your back. You have to have a supple arm to do that. Point to your hip. Point to you. Then you have to, wait a minute, that comes to my left side of my chest. So what does it mean? So in this way we can point out that there are different parts of the body, but the body is not really, when we say me, we speak of my leg, my hand, my arm. But who am I? So, he is not the body. He can feel that the hand, the leg, the head, the hair and the limbs are all his bodily parts and parcels. But as such, the hand, the leg, the head, etc. cannot be identified with his self. Yeah, so if you say this is if we postulate I am the body. So what do you mean the body? Okay, I have a basic trunk or torso with a head, 2 arms and 2 legs. Okay, chop off one hand. So what happened? Now that arm is not me. Why it's not me anymore? What happened? Well, it used to be me, but now it's not me because someone chopped it off. So now I'm me. The person in the bodily concept of life thinks that me is 1 arm, a torso, 2 legs and a head. Alright, chop off a leg. It's getting a little macabre, this description. And then, so is that leg me, or if you say I'm the body and you chop off the arm and then it's no longer me. So, alright, okay, then chop off the head. And then you die. So will you say that the head is the person? No. So what is the nature of the self? This is being discussed here. The hand, the leg, the head cannot be identified with the self. It's not actually me. If that's me and I cut it off, what happened? It's not me. It's not intrinsically part of me, because you can chop it off and I still exist. Or even if you cut off the head and you say, well, I don't exist, but then is the head me? I'm more than a head. In other words, the person is more than the sum of the body and the bodily parts. This is the discussion here. So therefore, just by using intelligence, he can distinguish and separate himself from other things that he sees, including the body. So the natural conclusion is that the living being, either man or beast, is the seer, and he sees besides himself all other things. Now this brings us to the word in the verse, drashta, the seer, and drishai, that which is seen. So even the body, we see the body by means of part of the body, but that is not actually, the seer is not me. Sometimes we say that, how do we see? Through the eyes. And that image is processed within the brain. But who is the actual seer? If we look in the brain, can we find what is the essence of the seer? Is it simply some fluid in the brain, or electrical discharges between the neurons? Is that the seer? What is the nature of the seer? This is being discussed here. There is a difference between the seer and the seen. Now, by a little use of intelligence, we can also readily agree that the living being who sees the things beyond himself by ordinary vision has no power to see or to move independently. Just going back a little bit, who is the seer? Is the person the brain? Well, there are many instances which have been recorded in modern times of especially people on operating tables, leaving the body when they're under anesthesia and they're supposed to be unconscious, and they see the operation going on their body, and they perceive themselves as separate. And there are many instances of this. This has been recorded by researchers. So someone may see the body but actually leave the body and just hover above it. This is common also in near-death experiences, where someone looks like they're dead and they're looking down on the body when everyone's standing around saying, "Oh, he died." Then they come back again in the body. This also, we can understand the difference between the body and the self by the expression, when someone dies, they say, "He has gone away." When the same body is there, then who went away? By saying "he has gone away," we express that actually we know that the self and the body are different. And it's not just an idiom of English, it's there in every language. I only know two other languages. Chale gaya, Gujaga, he died. Or chale geche. That's two languages. How do you say in Tamil? Must be some Tamils there. How do you say gone away? And how do you say someone died? That he went away? Po, something like that. Pui. Anyway, I'm sorry, I'm not good at Tamil. But anyway, you say it in Tamil also. When someone dies, you say gone away, right? In Malayalam, same thing. Pui, that's it. Okay. Marathi? Huh? No, but how do you say gone away? Chala. Same, gone away. Similar to Hindi. Chala gaya, something like that. So in every language, Chinese, Mandarin, whatever, what's the local Chinese around here? Must be. We have any? How do you say that? Someone, do you think they say in Chinese also? Atoa, something like that. Sorry for my Chinese. It's all Chinese to me. So, in every language of the world, in every culture, one way of saying that a person has died is to say that they have gone away. And as far as I've seen all over the world, we can ask whatever the local language is, and it's there in every language. It's interesting, isn't it? That means that intrinsically we realize that the body and the soul are different. What is it in Bahasa Indonesia? Same thing, gone away. Alright. Yeah, I was confident that it would be there. If I wasn't confident, I wouldn't say this. So, we can also readily agree the living being was... Now, there's a difference between the seer and the seen. By a little use of intelligence, we can also readily agree that the living being who sees the things beyond himself by ordinary vision has no power to see or move independently. Let's explain that. In other words, the power to see, I am seeing. I'm not the body, but what I am, I cannot see independently. This is being explained. That the power to see, Drik Shakti, it's not an intrinsic power of my own. This is being explained here. All our ordinary actions and perceptions depend on various forms of energy supplied to us by nature in various combinations. So in other words, even if we have the power to see, if there's no light, we can't see anything. And similarly with all the other senses. We require the sense. Seeing is not simply a matter of having open eyes, but it also requires that there be objects of perception and the light to see them. There might be objects of perception but no light. You don't have experience of this in Singapore, but if you go in a village, not actually in a village, in a field, in a mountain valley, on the Amavasya night, in the monsoon. In other words, there's no light from sun or moon or stars, nothing. And not from neon lights. That's why I said out away from the city. Then even the hand this far in front of the face, the finger you cannot see it. You probably don't have experience of this. But one has to get away from the city, even a long way, because there's the light is refracted, even from some distance. That's why I said mountains. The mountains stop the refraction of light, so it becomes completely dark. So even the finger might be there, but you can't see it. The object to be seen is there, and the eyes are there, but without light we cannot see it. Our senses of perception and of action, that is to say our 5 perceptive senses, these are the Gyanendriyas, of 1 hearing, 2 touch, 3 sight, 4 taste, and 5 smell, as well as our 5 senses of action, the Karmendriya, namely hands, legs, speech, evacuation organs and reproductive organs, and also our 3 subtle senses, namely 1 mind, 2 intelligence and 3 ego. 13 senses in all are supplied to us by various arrangements of gross or subtle forms of natural energy. So the senses, I am the seer or the perceiver. Remember I said that seeing here it means not only seeing but all the senses. So our ability to perceive is through various senses, and we perceive various sense objects, but we don't, this is supplied to us. We don't supply them. So this means that apart from here the words are used, drishya and drashta, apart from the act of seeing and the seen, there is another external agency. This is the reasoning that's going on. There is some external energy by which the sense objects are, and the intermediary energy are supplied, by which the act of seeing or the act of perceiving is consummated. It is equally evident that our objects of perception are nothing but the products of the inexhaustible permutations and combinations of the forms taken by natural energy. As this conclusively proves that the ordinary living being has no independent power of perception or of motion, and as we undoubtedly feel our existence being conditioned by nature's energy, we conclude that he who sees is spirit, and that the senses as well as the objects of perception are material. The ordinary living being has no independent power of perception or of motion. So that I was saying, we can't independently perceive, or of motion. Our karmendriyas, they cannot work. We don't supply the energy for our karmendriyas to work, or even for our gyanendriyas. You may have a hand by which we should touch and feel, but if the nerves, for some reason, if the nerves are cut or not working, then we can't feel, or if there's something in the brain connected to these nerves, then we can't feel like this. Or if it's very cold, you have no experience in Singapore, maybe in the icebox in the fridge or something. But if it becomes very cold, then also one cannot feel anything. And even to move like this, you see. Now, everyone can do this, right? We take it for granted. The teacher in the school says, who knows the answer to the question? Put your hand up. And the children don't think, okay, arm, move, they just, hand goes up. We take it for granted. But I had an experience once of how we take it for granted. But we shouldn't take it for granted. I woke up one winter morning in Baroda in Gujarat, which gets quite cold in the winter. And I couldn't move my arm at all. It was completely stiff from the cold, whatever. I just couldn't move it. I was wearing like this a coat. I couldn't take it off to take bath. I couldn't brush my teeth with my right hand, with my left hand, which I wasn't practiced at doing. It was completely stiff. Couldn't move it at all. So I just presumed when I got up that, I'll get up and take off my kurta and go and take a shower. I just couldn't move it at all. So we take it for granted. I can do this, I can do that, I can move like this. But actually the power to do so is not our own independent power. This is the point there's some external agency that allows us to see, touch, taste, smell, feel, hear, and move, and here and there, and evacuate and speak. There's some external power that does that. Yeah. So, I am different from the body. This has been logically established. Of course, you can argue, those who are fond of argumentation, you can argue anything. That's why I say, when we say prove, when someone says prove it to me, well, first we have to accept some axioms. Because if we don't accept any axioms, then we can't prove anything. Someone may say, if they want to avoid, if they're just simply argumentatious and they want to avoid the logical conclusion, then they will question even the most obvious of axioms. Just like I was saying, someone can say that, well, we are all sitting here, and they'll say, well, maybe it's just all an imagination. So if you want to be that argumentative, then it's not something that then we can't have any logic, we can't have any discussion about anything. If we think that everyone is just a product of my imagination, then what discussion can we have with such a person? We have to accept certain axioms. But these argumentative people, when they feel hungry, they don't philosophize about, well, am I really hungry? Do I really exist? They go to the restaurant and order a plate of rice and curry or something like that. They don't philosophize, well, does this rice really exist? They just eat it, that's all. Which proves that their own philosophizing is simply sophistry or useless argumentation, just for the sake of arguing. So if anyone says that to you, does anything really exist? You say, well, try it for some time. Well, you don't really exist. The air doesn't really exist, so there's no point to breathe it. So just stop breathing. So try that philosophy for 10 minutes. And then if you have anything more to say, we can discuss it. Or another way you can do it is take one hammer and offer to hit that person on the head very hard with it and telling them, well, you know, the hammer doesn't exist and your head doesn't exist and the pain that you will no doubt feel, that also doesn't exist. Or if you want to be more practical, that the money in your pocket doesn't exist. So whether it doesn't exist in your pocket or doesn't exist in my pocket doesn't make any difference. So better it doesn't exist in my pocket. I'll take your money. And here's a book called Bhagavad-gita as it is, which I'll give you in exchange, which just shows what a damn fool you are and what need you have of some real philosophy. So we have an argument for everyone. So, where are we? This conclusively we conclude that he who sees his spirit, yes, I am of a different nature to the object, the senses and the objects of the senses, which are material. Therefore, we can say, I am spiritual. Spiritual means that it has a different nature to matter, a superior nature. The spiritual quality of the seer is manifest in our dissatisfaction with the limited state of materially conditioned existence. That's an interesting statement, isn't it? That we are dissatisfied with our existence in this world means that we're spiritual. Now, everyone's dissatisfied. We want more. Whatever we have, we want more. But this dissatisfaction, we say, well, that's just materialistic, isn't it? They have so many things and they want more. But in one sense, it can be perceived as the need of the soul. Because the soul wants more than what is being offered in the present material situation. So if someone says, I want more and more and more, you tell them, that's good. But why settle for just a few $1,000 or $1 million? Why not settle? Why not go for something much more even than that? Something which is of a quality that is completely in a different dimension to that of that which can be purchased by money. I mean, in Singapore, even if you have billions of Singapore dollars, you still can't buy a large estate to live in. Right? So there's a limit to what you can buy, especially in Singapore. And even if you have lots and lots of money, still one will be dissatisfied. So here it's suggested that the dissatisfaction that we feel in matter, this indirectly indicates that we are spiritual by nature, that we don't belong here at all. That's why we're dissatisfied, because this is not our natural environment. That is the difference between spirit and matter. There are some less intelligent arguments that matter develops the power of seeing and moving as a certain organic development, but such an argument cannot be accepted because there is no experimental evidence that matter has anywhere produced a living entity. Trust no future, however pleasant. Idle talks regarding future development of matter into spirit are actually foolish because no matter has ever developed the power of seeing or moving in any part of the world. Therefore, it is definite that matter and spirit are two different identities, and this conclusion is arrived at by the use of intelligence. Now we come to the point that the things which are seen by a little use of intelligence cannot be animate unless we accept someone as the user of or director of the intelligence. So things which are seen by a little use of intelligence. This refers not simply to the seeing by, not simply the perception of a sense object, but seeing by use of intelligence. That same point I was making about the scientists, if they, among themselves, if they make an experiment, they may say, well, this experiment proves such and such. To them it does. To someone else it doesn't prove anything, because they don't know, they don't have the training to understand the significance of what they've seen. When an apple fell next to, or maybe on the head of, a certain Isaac Newton, it could have happened to anyone. I mean, people see fruit, we don't see fruit falling from trees much, but we see flowers, certain trees, that now the palm trees, the blossom is falling off, and we find the parijata every morning, the flower is, you can see the flower, it looks like a small rain falling in the morning. So we can see the flower falling from the tree, so everyone sees it, but when Isaac Newton, so it is said, in science, in the folklore of science, that upon seeing an apple falling from a tree, it made him think, and it made him think, gravity, this is the reason. So, everyone sees flowers and fruit falling from trees, but one who has scientific perception, they see, to some extent, why. So, just like we say in English, I see, means I understand. I couldn't come because my car broke down. I see. Means I understand. I follow the reasoning. It makes sense. So, that which we see by a little use of intelligence, in other words, seeing, it's not just a matter of, again, it's not just a matter of seeing the objects of the sense, or perceiving the objects of the senses, but it's how we process and understand it also. That it's not just the interaction of the senses with the sense objects, but intelligence is applied also. Now that we perceive that there is animation, things move. Animate beings. That means animals, plants to a limited extent, fish, birds, insects, reptiles. They cannot be animate unless we accept someone as the user of or director of the intelligence. Intelligence gives one direction like some higher authority. And the living being cannot see or move or eat or do anything without the use of intelligence. It's not just seeing, but it's how we process it. And every living being has some kind of intelligence. Those, even non-humans, the more intelligent among the non-humans, they can be trained to do tricks. You can teach a dog or a dolphin to do... The dolphin, you teach the dolphin to jump through a hoop, and then we'll throw you some fish to eat. So the dolphin thinks, I like fish to eat, and so if I jump through the hoop, I will get a fish to eat. So of course he doesn't logically work it out, but there's something going on in the dolphin's reasoning process, or whatever. But that the dolphin himself is not making various logical propositions within his mind, but that intelligence is directed. The dolphin is not a psychologist, but he has his mind works in an intelligent way, to some extent. So that, how is that intelligence directed? Intelligent means it moves in what we say in an intelligent way. If someone doesn't act intelligently, then they're stupid, and you can't train. Or someone whose intelligence is retarded, they're born with retarded intelligence, and then you can't train them to do simple things like crossing the road, which requires intelligence. You have to look and see, is traffic coming? Is traffic coming? Okay, don't go now. Or actually you have to go to the crossing, right? You go to the crossing, and when the light says go, pedestrians cross, then you cross. So it all requires intelligence. What is the background of the intelligence? That should be considered. When one fails to take advantage of intelligence, he becomes a deranged man, right? The retarded child. Or one may be deranged by taking intoxication. One's intelligence becomes deranged, splayed out. Or maybe if there's an accident, and then the brain function becomes impaired. Or it may be due to extreme emotionalism. One may be very angry. In anger, someone kills a loved one out of anger. The intelligence is deranged. Or due to grief, one may take one's own life. Or due to grief or ecstasy or any extreme emotion, one may not even be able to cross the road. One's just not aware, and you may wander into the street with the cars coming. So And so a living being is dependent on intelligence or the direction of a superior being. Such intelligence is all-pervading. So that how the intelligence is all-pervading, I gave some idea of that. Just like when I say something, you hear a sound. I say cow. And the word cow, it's just a word. And you can say it again, it's something that can be said in different languages. Gai, or go, or goru. These are various terms for cow. And if you know the language, then when we say the word, then it creates an impression. If I say that we're training children, don't cross the road when vehicles are coming. So then they get all the words. Don't cross the road when the vehicles are coming. All the different words enter into their mind, and they process that, and they get the idea, don't cross the road when the vehicles are coming. So there may be no road and no vehicles, it's just some sounds which are made, but because there's a pool, or there's a pool of intelligence, that these sounds, when put together in a certain way, they convey a concept which is intelligently perceived by others. That's how we can have communication. Through an intelligence that is, we both possess that intelligence, and at the same time it's external to all of us, and we all have it. So there's a body of intelligence is all pervading. Every living being has his intelligence, and this intelligence being the direction of some higher authority, we can understand that. How can I understand what you say, or you understand what I say? There's some higher authority who has made all this, has made this system. This intelligence, being the direction of some higher authority, is just like a father giving direction to his son. The higher authority who is present and residing within every living being is the super self. So how is my intelligence connected to your intelligence? That means there's one central intelligence directing agency, not the CIA. It's something different. Well, actually Krishna is the same. Here we can say the Paramatma is the original CIA, Central Intelligence Agency, but in a different sense to what is normally understood by the CIA. It means that the central intelligence of every living being, and the way that my intelligence can link with your intelligence, and my intelligence can link with the world around me, that is possible. There's a meeting of our intelligence, and one person can convey something to someone else, not only by words. Sometimes by looking at someone you can convey something. Sometimes by not speaking. Just like Prabhupada, Srila Prabhupada, we're told that when Prabhupada was angry, you would know about it, because he would let you know. And sometimes, just like Shruta Kirti Prabhu, his servant for some years, he said that when Prabhupada shouted at you, it wasn't pleasant. You may think, I'd like to be with Prabhupada, but Prabhupada, if his servants did anything wrong, which they did quite often, then Prabhupada would shout. You'd get very angry, and you wouldn't feel pleasant. You wouldn't feel that's very nice. But Shrutakirti Prabhu said that I'd do anything to get that opportunity to have Prabhupada shout at me now. Now Prabhupada's not shouting at me, but I wish I could be with Prabhupada so that he could shout at me. Although it wasn't perceived as pleasant at the time. But Prabhupada, his anger, if he was really, really very, 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 very angry, he would be silent. And that was the worst. Just like Pushta Krishna Swami was driving the car and he was neglectful, and he crashed into an ox cart or something, and Prabhupada was slightly injured. He was driving too fast. And Prabhupada didn't say anything, and everyone just, in the car, everyone just felt Prabhupada's anger. He didn't say anything, but everyone could feel his anger. So it's not just by, it may be by gestures, or by not saying anything, or sometimes something, by neglect also. One can convey, I don't care about you. Just like, you make a phone call and say, please call me back, and the person is on the voicemail and they don't call you back. And by that you can understand, well, they don't care. It's important to me, but it's not important to him. So we can deduce this. Why is that? Because there is an external overseeing intelligence, Paramatma. All the Atmas are linked by Paramatma. At this point in our investigation, we may consider the following question. On the one hand, we realize that all our perceptions and activities are conditioned by arrangements of material nature. Yet we also ordinarily feel and say, I am perceiving or I am doing. So it's what's going on. There's an interaction of the material nature. But the senses are material, the sense objects are material, but we say, I am doing. So this is quite, this is the subject we'll find in the 13th chapter of Bhagavad-gita. What's the title of the 13th chapter of Bhagavad-gita? Nature. Kshetragya Yoga. So the understanding the nature of how the Atma interacts with the material nature under the direction of Paramatma. This is the subject, the principal subject of the 13th chapter of Bhagavad-gita. So, therefore we can say that our material senses of perception and action are moving because we are identifying the self with the material body. and that the superior principle of super self is guiding and supplying us according to our desire. So I hope you can follow this. I'm trying to give a line-by-line commentary. Ravindra Swarup Prabhu, one of our, maybe you've heard of him, he's a big philosopher in our movement. I must say on some issues I don't agree with him, but on certain social issues, but that's inconsequential to the discussion under hand. But he gave a whole seminar over several days on discussing this verse. So I'm just trying to go through it quickly, as far as I understand it. I think you can download that from the internet if you look under Ravindra Swarupa. If you really want to get into this in more detail, which it's a good thing to apply our intelligence to. I think most of you are here because of your intelligence, isn't it? You have a job in Singapore instead of in Bombay or Pune or whatever, because someone with a company thought that our Singapore branch needs someone with a brain. Okay, you get the job. So your brains are used for writing software and all kinds of things like that. But traditionally those with brains in Indian culture, that means your forefathers, would apply their intelligence to these kind of matters. Nowadays it's applied to matters of not very much consequence at all, but actually this is the proper use of intelligence. So it seems that often our devotees, it's for them the Krishna consciousness is like in some sense a kind of relief from the hard grind of applying your intelligence to all kinds of uninteresting things which you have to do to get some money. And then we come and we chant and we dance, and that's very nice, and we listen to some lecture, and that's very nice, and we hear some stories and have a laugh, tell a few jokes in the lecture. But actually we're supposed to apply our intelligence to understand the philosophy which is being presented here. So, like I say, my understanding of these things is quite limited. And it would require anyway a lot more time to go through them. But anyway, I'm just trying to go through it briefly. So it's really worth going through it slowly and just trying to digest every point step by, because if you miss a step, then you're lost. You have to take in every step, just like with a mathematical equation. Somewhere along the line, if you make a mistake, then the result is going to be a mistake also. Or if you're given a mathematical problem to solve, and at some point you get stuck, then you just can't go any further. So we have to go by step to understand this. So by taking advantage of the guidance of super self in the form of intelligence. Now you see there's an external intelligence which is directing and coordinating all our individual intelligences. That's been discussed, right? Now it's being suggested that we can take help from that intelligence. That the super self, we can either continue to study to go beyond this. Okay, there is a super intelligence. Okay, what's the next step? And to put into practice our conclusion that I am not this body. I'm not the body. I'm spirit, and there's super spirit. Okay, alright, but what difference does that make? I'm hungry and I'm not the body, but I feel hungry, so it's time to eat something. But how can I go beyond simply the bodily functions of eating, sleeping, mating and defending? That should be the next step in our quest to understand this principle. Or we can choose to remain in the false material identification. If we say, well, that was very nice philosophy, but what the hell, it doesn't matter. I'll just go on eating, sleeping, mating and defending. We can choose to remain to not take advantage of this revelation. And we can fancy ourselves to be the possessors and doers. Ishvaraham aham bhogi. I am enjoying and I am controlling. Oh, round the other way. Ishvaraham. Yeah, I'm the possessor and the doer. I, me and mine. I am a great software professional. I am a proud father of 2 children. I am an Indian citizen. I am. But here we are asked to go beyond this. Our freedom consists in orienting our desire either toward the ignorant material misconception or the true spiritual conception. So here, if someone's honest enough to go step by step and understand that we are spiritual beings, then we can choose either to remain in the ignorance of deliberately choosing to neglect our spiritual nature, or we can actually enter into spiritual life. We can easily attain to the true spiritual conception by recognizing the super self, Paramatma, to be our friend and guide. In other words, there is a superior intelligence. Now we have to put our faith in that, because that intelligence means it's not just some amorphous non-being, but that means a person. Intelligence means a person. So if we accept that person as our friend and guide, and by dovetailing our intelligence with the superior intelligence of Paramatma. So Paramatma is guiding us anyway. We feel hungry, okay, what shall I do? Go to the restaurant, get something to eat. So the Paramatma is guiding me. I have a headache, get some aspirins, or rub some tiger balm on my head. Do something, or just ignore it and hope it goes away. Or it persists, okay, go see a doctor. You have a lump in your head. You have a brain tumor. Oh, really? We don't know. So, we can, by intelligence, redirect it. Do this, do that. Don't bother. They tell you, we say, don't bother doing anything, it'll just go away. That's also some, where does these what's the word? This inspiration to act or to act in various ways. Where does that come from? If we accept that there is an external agency, and that we intuit that external person who's giving me this intelligence is good, God is good, then we can trust God and dovetail our intelligence with the superior intelligence of the Paramatma. So we come a long way, right? Now we're talking about God. The superior intelligence, dovetailing our intelligence with His intelligence. The super self and the individual self are both spirit. Of course, that would need to be explained more if we're really going to get into it very deeply. What is the nature of spirit? Spirit is Satchidananda, possessed of eternity, or of the nature of eternity, bliss and knowledge, and matter is Asat Achit Nirananda. Non-eternal means everything here is temporary, everything material is temporary, by nature is temporary. Devoid of actual knowledge of our existential position, and not possessed of bliss, or possessed of a very a very insignificant kind of bliss, which is a kind of cheating or misleading. There is happiness in the material world, but it's a misleading kind of happiness because it attracts us to that which causes our intense suffering. So it's a false kind of happiness. False and very dangerous kind of happiness. Yeah, the super self and the individual self are both qualitatively one and distinct from matter. So there's a oneness about us all, and as much as we're all part of this mass intelligence pool, which has a central personality directing it. So ourselves, in one sense, we're one with everyone else, and we're one with the supreme intelligence also, qualitatively. But the super self and the individual self cannot be on an equal level because the super self gives direction or supplies intelligence, and the individual self follows the directions, and thus actions are performed properly. So now we distinguish between spirit and matter, and that there is a supreme spirit is also being established. The individual is completely dependent on the direction of the super self, because in every step the individual self follows the direction of the super self in the matter of seeing, hearing, thinking, feeling, willing, etc. So far as common sense is concerned, we come to the conclusion that there are three identities, namely matter, spirit, and super spirit. Now if we go to the Bhagavad-gita or the Vedic intelligence, how are we going to take advantage of the intelligence, the superior intelligence? Well, the superior intelligence communicates to us through the agency of Guru, Sadhu and Shastra, of which the center is Shastra, which is Veda Narayanam Sakshat, which is given by Narayana or the Supreme Intelligence directly. So, if we go to the Bhagavad-gita or the Vedic intelligence, we can further understand that all three identities, namely matter, individual, spirit and the super spirit, are all dependent on the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So I was saying at the beginning of the class that this verse is used by Jiva Goswami to establish that there is the individual self and the Atma and the Paramatma, but there must be Bhagavan also. There is Brahman, Paramatma and Bhagavan. In establishing that the subject matter of the Srimad Bhagavatam is Bhagavan, he cites this verse with this explanation. So it's actually a subject matter of very deep philosophy, and it would be, we pray for the day in future when all these good brains of India and the rest of the world also, but the culture is there in India, stop using all their, or instead of using their intelligence for making rich people richer and making all kinds of complex technology, apply their intelligence to show the glory of the Vedic knowledge and intelligence, and to show the glory of our Vaishnava Acharyas, because Jiva Goswami, he's taken all the philosophies of all the Vedantists, especially Shankaracharya, Ramanujacharya, Madhvacharya. Shankaracharya also, he uses Shankaracharya's system and the Mimamsakas, and he shows the conclusion of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's, what he preached, Achintya Veda Veda Tattva. So it's not just our belief. People ask us, what do you believe? Srila Prabhupada always says it's not a question of belief. It's a science. So here we are discussing in this purport the Bhagavad Tattva Vijnanam, the science of knowledge of Bhagavan, who is the subject matter of Srimad Bhagavatam. So this verse which we're discussing today, in this way Jiva Goswami has made an elaborate commentary to show how we can perceive that the self and the super self exist, but beyond them there must be the Bhagavan feature of the personality of Godhead. So the super self is a partial representation or plenary portion of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. In other words, God's function is not simply to operate in this material world to direct the the intelligence of all living. Ishvara sarva bhutanam hrideshe arjuna tishtati brahmayan sarva bhutani yantrayudharni mayaya. That's not the main function of God. He does that. He directs the wandering of all living beings who are on various machines known as bodies. But that's not His ultimate function. That's only a certain function which is performed in His Paramatma feature. The Bhagavad-gita affirms that the Supreme Personality of Godhead dominates all over the material world by His partial representation only. God is great, and He cannot be simply an order supplier of the individual selves. In other words, God's got His own things to do apart from directing this material world. He is much more than simply the creator, maintainer and destroyer of this material world. He has His own world. Therefore, the Super Self cannot be a full representation of the Supreme Self, Purushottam, the Absolute Personality of Godhead. Realization of the Super Self by the individual self is the beginning of self-realization. And by progress of such self-realization, one is able to realize the Supreme Personality of Godhead by intelligence, by the help of authorized scriptures, and principally by the grace of the Lord. The Bhagavad-gita is the preliminary conception of the personality of Godhead, Sri Krishna, and Srimad Bhagavatam is the further explanation of the science of Godhead. So if we stick to our determination and pray for the mercy of the director of intelligence sitting within the same bodily tree, like a bird sitting with another bird, as explained in the Upanishads, certainly the purport of the revealed information in the Vedas becomes clear to our vision, and there is no difficulty in realizing the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Vasudeva. The intelligent man, therefore, after many births of such use of intelligence, surrenders himself at the lotus feet of Vasudeva, as confirmed by the Bhagavad-gita, chapter 7, verse 19. Hare Krishna. Well, please chant Hare Krishna for a few minutes, and I'll see you in a few minutes' time. Krishna willing. Alright? Like to sing? I have to go to the bathroom, bodily function. I have to exercise one of my kamendriyas.
Talk about Prabhupada's anger.
Prabhupada's anger.
I wish to understand that because Maharaj is contrary to the perception of somebody. When we talk about Prabhupada's anger, I want to understand.
You want to understand how Prabhupada's silence conveyed anger.
Not that, but the perception of a sage being angry. This is what I.
Why a sage can be angry?
How or why?
Well, generally we think that a saintly person shouldn't be angry because he has no personal desires. So if he doesn't get insulted or he's detached from everything, so why should he get angry about anything? That's the normal understanding of the Sthita Dhi Muni. He's fixed. But one who loves Krishna has all the emotions in full. If someone insults Krishna, then a devotee becomes extremely angry. Hanuman is the greatest devotee. Why? Because he's chanting Ram, Ram, Ram. Well, that's one reason. But he's went and burned Lanka. He was angry at Ravana for being such a rascal. If you love someone, you can't tolerate that they will be. You can't tolerate that person will be insulted, or even if someone is not serving properly, you'll be angry. Just like in this book, Glimpses of Traditional Indian Life, I wrote how one young woman come from the country with the whole family, it seemed, they just come from the village and they were new in the city and they never seen all the traffic. And one young woman let one of the children wander in the street, and then an older woman saw that and grabbed the child back from the road. It was very dangerous. And then the older woman was very angry with the younger woman. So that anger was an expression of her love for the child. But how could you not look after the child properly? So anger can be an expression of love. Now in this case you may say, well, why should Prabhupada bother? It wasn't just him. But he has to, it means that the disciple was being neglectful by driving so fast without proper attention. That means he wasn't doing his service properly. The Guru's duty is to train the disciple. So, just like for instance, there are disciples of Tamal Krishna Maharaj here, yes, some disciples in Singapore. So, those who knew Tamal Krishna Maharaj or even knew of him knew that he was what we would call a very heavy person. He was very strict. Do a little thing wrong and he'd get angry. He'd let you know. But then we also know that his disciples, it's generally known that they're very well trained, very conscientious. So the two things don't go together. Just letting people do whatever they like and training them, the two things don't go together. So the Guru, he will to train his disciples as a service to them so they can come closer to Krishna. He may exhibit anger is a very good way of training actually, because not like the Shruti Kirti Prabhu I was quoting him, you don't like, if you just say don't do it, oh okay, alright, I won't do it, then do it again. So, but then if the Guru is angry with you and then you feel it, and you don't want, just like the dolphin is given the fish for jumping through the hoop, or he may be punished for doing something wrong. So this is training of an animal or of a human being. It is by offering incentives and by offering punishment also. So I won't elaborate on this further. I hope the matter is understood. Anything else? Yes, please.
Thank you for Maharaj, I had a question regarding that you said that out of body experience.
Out of what, sorry?
Out of body experience.
Out of body experience, yeah.
Which you told that the soul leaves the body and
the perceiver who generally identifies with the body, perceives that he's perceiving the body, but he's no longer in it.
Yeah.
So he perceives that he's separate from the body. And he is independent from the body. That he presumed previously that my existence is... He probably never even thought about it before, but he just took it as a given, as axiomatic, that his perception was via the senses of the body. But then he was able to perceive that even though I'm separate from the body, but I'm still perceiving.
So Maharaj, when that self is inside the body, that still needs the senses to perceive.
He still needs the gross physical senses to perceive. Generally, it's considered like that. That's the condition of the conditioned soul. For a pure devotee, apparently maybe also, but he has spiritualized senses. Or even for a yogi, he can perceive things which he can read other people's minds, or he can tell you what's happening, maybe tell you what happened in the... Even not yogi, I've met people who you meet them and they just look at you and they tell you what happened in your life up till now. So how do they do that? What we call mystic intuition or mind reading. It's because they have certain connection with the Paramatma that we don't. And we take that to be something mystical.
While the soul, the perceiver is perceiving...
Yeah, in the conditioned state we generally perceive via the senses of the body. But the whole point of this discussion is to demonstrate that the senses are separate from the perceiver. And that actually therefore we don't actually have an intrinsic relationship with anything material, including the body that we're presently in. It only appears like that. It seems like that. It's a big illusion. And we take it to be true. We presume that it's true. It's a mass hoax. Just like at the present time in America, there are many people who don't believe that the Twin Towers, the 9/11, they don't believe that it was done by an external terrorist agency. They believe it was done by the George Bush and company. It was an inside job. There are many people who believe that. And there's pretty much there's considerable circumstantial evidence to support that theory. In fact, there's been a video made about it and everything. And then other people say, well, how could they know it's just too much. How could you say such a thing? It's too big an impossibility. So most people, they don't even want to think about it. If you say that, well, maybe highly placed, maybe senators took a bribe, they could believe that. But such a big lie, such a big hoax, or like the moon trip, there are many people in America also don't believe that this Buzz Aldrin, or who was that supposed to be? Edwin Aldrin. He wasn't Neil Armstrong, not the singer, the other one. He was the one who made one small step for man and one great step for mankind. And then there's plenty of circumstantial evidence which suggests that one small step for man was made in the Nevada desert and not on the moon. Or maybe just in a studio somewhere in America. But then there are other people, it's just too big, you know. How can that be? It's just impossible. So, there's a saying, if you really want to tell a lie, make it a big one. Make it such a big lie that people can't believe, or that it's such a big hoax. A senator taking a bribe, yeah, we can believe that. But that it was an inside job, felling the Twin Towers, and there weren't any planes actually. Although they didn't go to the moon. And that's just, so people, it's like a mass delusion that everyone believes they went to the moon. There's no evidence. They made a movie around the same time called 2001: A Space Odyssey. I saw it as a kid, in which they showed the same kind of thing. It came out shortly before they went to the moon. So the whole thing, we saw it on TV, they went to the moon, and Prabhupada was watching it and laughing and saying it's all a hoax. So how do you know they went? It could be just animation done in the studio. But people can't believe everyone buys into the same hoax. So we all mutually assist each other in keeping each other in Maya and thinking that I am this body. How are you? We say, how are you? That means, how is your body? That's what we mean to say, isn't it? That's why when people ask me, how are you? I say, what do you mean? And then they get confused. What do you mean? Well, do you mean the body? That's not me. And the body is anyway Sharira Vyadhi Mandiram. You can't say it's good. If you say the body is good, that means it's not as bad as it could be. Or if you say, who are you, referring to the soul, it's also a stupid question, because the soul by nature can never be in any bad situation. So either way you take it, it's a stupid question. How are you? So, but we generally take to mean, how are you means, how is your bodily health? But I'm not the body, so it's not me.